Orthog has finally made it to Gundabad. He strides up to the door. 2 orc guards attempt to stop him. Orthog demands entry as he claims himself War Chief of Moria. They look at each other and laugh. Orthog threatens to kill them both if they do not let him pass. He is on urgent business, and the dwarves must be stopped. They step aside and let him pass. Orthog enters and finds the War Chief of Gundabad talking to the Mouth of Sauron. He explains to them that the dwarves have returned to Moria, and he needs an army to take it back. The Mouth of Sauron smiles. Back in Moria, the dwarves are hard at work rebuilding. They enter the waterworks, a large cavern with water wheels and aqueducts. The majority of the cavern is filled with water, with only a few roads and bridges built to access the different sections of the cavern. Hona, Ori, and their dwarf group start pulling levers and clearing out moss and sludge from the pipes and wheels. The water wheels start moving and the water starts to flow. This does awaken some of the creatures that lie within Moria, such as spiders, bats, and what the dwarves like to call cave claws, a giant mole or shrew-like creature, but with a large beak for a head, allowing it to dig through the strongest of rock. For the most part, they leave the dwarves alone, but if they start to get aggressive, the dwarves handle them with ease. With the water wheels turning again, the dwarves could start growing plants and food in the gardens. Owen and his group are in the gardens, which are built on the top floors of Moria, so they have direct access to the sun from the skylights built in the ceiling. There are plots of dirt scattered around the area, big ones for trees and smaller ones for farming. Waterfalls flow from the walls of the room, with canals on the floor connecting in the center. Owen and the dwarves plant seeds while others grab water from the canals with buckets and then pour water onto the plots of dirt. Owen teaches others how to plant the seeds and help them grow. This will be a good source of food until Moria is safe to return for all dwarves across Middle-earth. Frar, Nolly, and Loney are with a third group of dwarves, and they go to the Hall of Mirrors. They readjust giant mirrors in the shape of hands so that the light from the outside can be reflected into the rest of Moria. Many halls light up once the mirrors are in place. And finally, Balin leads the remaining dwarves throughout all corners of Moria, clearing out any threats they come across. They reopen various mines within the Redhorn and the Silvertine lodes. Scouts were sent to the Great Forges to see if there was any dangers. Aside from mass gatherings of goblins, there was no sign of the Balrog, so Balin ordered the forges to be retaken. They came across Durin's throne room. However, the room is completely sealed by the collapsed ceiling. Though a small hope, Balin does hope that the Balrog lies trapped within Durin's throne room. If it does lie within, then they have no need to deal with the Balrog. With the water flowing, the gardens growing, the halls relit and the forges burning once again, the dwarves can start rebuilding the various neighborhoods that were constructed. And after 3 years, life once again begins to flourish within the halls of Moria. Balin then organizes a massive feast in celebration of their great triumph. During this feast, they begin to sing.
The hammer on the anvil smote, their chisel clove and graver wrote. Their forge was blade and bound was hilt, the delver mind, the mason built. Unwearied then were Durin's folk, beneath the mountains new minstrel sang, and at the gates the trumpets rang.
The day after the feast, Balin, Ori, and Owen gather and discuss how they should defeat the Balrog. Since Floey's defeat at the Dimrill Gate, they have avoided dealing with the Balrog, but they can no longer do so. Owen thinks that they should just avoid the Abyss. It has been years with no signs of the Balrog roaming around. If it has not made an appearance now, they shouldn't go find it and keep living in peace. Ori doesn't like the idea of letting the Balrog roam free if it is still around, but he doesn't like the idea of trying to trap it or defeat it now that Floey is gone. Balin ignores both ideas and stresses that he promised King Dain that they would take care of the Balrog so that Moria was safe to return to. He suggests that they stick with the plan of luring the Balrog into another room and locking it in, but with explosives instead of magically sealing the door. Ori is concerned that the sounds of the explosion might wake something else up or cause more of the mountain to collapse, opening up new undiscovered passages or caverns, letting more creatures out. But Balin refuses to let this go. There is no other way in his eyes. So he orders Ori and Owen to find volunteers to travel to the Abyss and search for the Balrog. Ori leaves with Owen and starts searching for volunteers. A rush of dwarves come to help. Frar and his brothers stand by as Hona pushes past them. Hona asks to volunteer, but Ori declines her. She is a strong warrior and a great leader. So if something bad should happen, he wants her to lead the remaining dwarves. Frar volunteers himself and his two brothers, Nolly and Loni. Hona, though understands, is hurt by Ori's choice. Loni tries to cheer her up by saying that she's the better leader, and if Frar tried to lead, he would end up getting everyone killed by rushing into trouble without thinking. Hona smiles and thanks Loni for the comfort. Balin, Ori, and Owen lead the volunteers, including the three brothers, down to the Abyss as Hona stays behind to look after the dwarves in the 21st Hall. The dwarves have made their way to the Abyss, the dark depths of Moria. The light from the upper halls does not reach here. There is no telling what time of day it is. It has been a long journey. The dwarves are all exhausted. Loni looks into the darkness and starts to see shadowy figures form and start to approach. He yells out to the company and points to the shadows. Frar, Nolly, and the rest of the dwarves stop and look into the darkness, but see nothing. Loni sits there scared and confused, as he was convinced he saw something moving about. Ori runs up to Balin and suggests that they rest here. Balin refuses and demands they keep going until they know they have found clues to the Balrog's whereabouts. Ori continues to stress how important it is that they rest here as everyone is getting tired. Balin thinks and agrees and apologizes. He explains that he finds himself becoming more and more like Thorin and their ancestors, going mad with greed. They all started to lose their true self. Thorin only cared about the Arkenstone and is willing to sacrifice anything or anyone to get it. Balin does not want to be remembered like that. Ori comforts him by sharing that he will not write Balin that way in his book. Balin will be remembered as a great leader, a hero, just like Thorin and their forefathers. Ori suggests Balin get some rest while he searches for volunteers to take on guard duty for the night. Once again, Frar volunteers himself and his brothers. Ori thanks him and his brothers, then goes to sleep. Nolly and Loni are now getting frustrated with Frar. They are tired of being volunteers without being asked. Loni just wants to sleep as he's scared of what's in the darkness and does not want to stay awake. Frar reminds them that they came here to find glory and to be written in the books and to be remembered. If that's their goal, they must be volunteers so people know they can be trusted and counted on. He attempts to reassure Loni that everything is fine and that they will take a longer watch so Loni can get some sleep. Loni and Nolly reluctantly agree, even though they feel like they don't have a choice at this point. The night continues and the dwarves slowly fall asleep. The fire gets smaller and smaller. Frar's watch goes smoothly. He thinks he hears some voices, but doesn't think anything of it. Hours go by, and his watch comes to an end. He wakes up Nolly. Frar goes to sleep, and Nolly's watch begins. The first couple of hours go smoothly. The last half, though, he thinks he sees shadows creeping towards the camp. He begins to remember back to what Loney mentioned when they first arrived. The shadows get bigger, but then starts to think it's his mind playing tricks on him, and that he's just tired, so thinks nothing of them. The shadows immediately disappear, and they don't return for the rest of his watch. Nolly then goes and wakes up Loney. Loney asks how it went. Nolly says it was fine. He mentions the shadows he thinks he saw, but says it was nothing in the end. Nolly passes out, and Loney's watch begins. He can't stop thinking about the shadows. Sure enough, moments later, the shadows form again and approach the camp. Loney is terrified. The shadows creep closer. He thinks he starts hearing voices coming from them. The shadows growl. He calls out to his brothers, but there is no answer. He turns around and everyone is gone. The shadows start to form into creatures with purple skin, no eyes, no faces, just mouths with sharp teeth. Loney starts to panic and scream. The faceless creatures get closer and closer. They start growling and speak in some ancient, dark language unknown to Loney. As faceless creatures slowly approach Loney, he thinks he can hear his brothers' voices, faintly calling from the darkness. Loney calls out for his brothers again, and explaining he is scared and alone, he doesn't see anyone but these creatures. One of the faceless grabs Loney by the arm. He cries out in pain as the touch begins to burn his skin. The faceless begin to laugh. But Loney hears Ori's voice. He's trying to tell Loney that they aren't real, and that all of his friends and his brothers are standing right next to him. Let the fear go away. Loney starts to think back to what Hona told him in the second hall about finding courage and not giving in to fear. It's not something one can learn, but has to be found in a time of need. He thinks hard and is able to find his courage for a brief moment, and shouts out loud that he is not afraid. The faceless creature's hold on him begins to weaken, and as they stand over him, they slowly start to form into his brothers. He hugs his brothers as he begins to cry in relief. He asks where they were, and they explain that they were always here. It was just in his head. Ori looks at Loney's arm, though, and notices the burn mark in the shape of a grotesque hand. It may not have actually been fully in his head after all. They all ponder and discuss what just transpired. Ori determines that these faceless, nameless creatures only appeared when someone was scared. If you ignored or overcame your fear, the creatures would disappear. Giving into your fear gave the creatures more power and became more and more real. Flowey did warn everyone that they would find some dark magic or corruption the closer they got to the Balrog, so this must be what he meant. Everyone looks concerned, but Balin gets excited as he takes this as a sign that they are close to the Balrog and freeing Moria forever. Ori offers to take Loney's watch. Loney, shaken, falls asleep beside his brother Nolly. Hours pass and Ori wakes up the dwarves. They pack up and the company moves deeper into the mountain. It is still pitch black, even though it is morning. Balin leads the group with torch in hand, and after a few hours of travel, they find large glowing mushrooms covered in warts and slime. Ori points to the ground beneath their feet. Scorch marks can be seen. The ground has been burnt. The group follows the mushrooms and the scorch marks until they find a large abandoned mine shaft. The mine is covered in mushrooms and fungus. A few meters from the mine lies a large lake. As Ori and Balin search this mine shaft, Frar sees something shimmering from inside. Balin ponders for a moment and takes a second look. There's scorch marks all inside the mine and the entrance. Burned skeletons lie everywhere. Giant footprints are in the soft ground. He then realizes this is where the Balrog was discovered. He yells to Frar, but Frar is distracted by the shimmering from inside the mine shaft. Balin shouts to Frar again and orders the dwarves to start setting explosives near the entrance. The dwarves start laying down explosive barrels, but Frar continues to follow the shimmering light and discovers Durin's axe and armor. He picks them up and yells to Balin what he found. Rumbling from within the mine can be heard. Frar starts to run with Durin's axe and armor in hand. Behind him, the rumbling can be heard once more, and a light that glows like red flame can be seen in the distance. Frar begins sprinting as fast as he can. At the entrance of the mine, the dwarves have just finished planting all the barrels with a trail of black powder leading to a giant rock a safe distance away. The light at the end of the mineshaft begins to grow, and a loud roar is heard. The sound of large footsteps approach Frar and begin to pick up speed. It is clear now that this light is now fire, and it begins to spread. All the dwarves start running towards the rock for safety. The Balrog gets closer and closer to the entrance, pulls out a flaming sword. He leaps to safety as the Balrog makes a swing with his sword. Balin signals for the explosion. A dwarf lights the black powder. The trail of black powder starts to burn, leading back to the entrance of the mine. Frar gets up from the ground and starts sprinting to the rock. Balin looks into the mine and sees red eyes. The Balrog peeks its head out of the mine, and right before it can take another step forward, the barrels explode with great force, collapsing the mine. Rocks from above continue to fall, causing the mine to cave in completely. The Balrog yells out in anger and tries to push through the rocks, but there is too many. Rocks continue to fall on top of it, and the Balrog goes silent. The dwarves celebrate. Frar, still shaken from the encounter, hands the axe and armor to Balin. Balin inspects the gear. Balin holds the axe up high and brings it down hard on the rock they were using as protection from the explosion. The axe cuts cleanly through the rock, and the axe is unharmed. This is indeed Durin's axe, the great mithril axe. So the armor must be Durin's armor. Balin hands the axe to Owen. Owen is confused as technically Balin is the eldest and the closest connection to Durin's bloodline. Balin says he wants Owen to have it nonetheless, and that he will keep the armor instead. Owen thanks Balin as he takes the axe and admires it. Balin admires the mithril armor and begins to smile as the Balrog is finally dealt with. Ori is just concerned that they didn't wake anything else up. Balin says that no matter what they encounter, they can handle it so long as they stick together. They can overcome anything and everything, as nothing is worse than a Balrog. The dwarves leave the mine and head back to the 21st Hall. As they leave, ripples begin to appear in the large lake that sat outside the mine entrance. Rocks underneath the water's surface begin to move, and a cave opens up. A large shadow with tentacles moves out of the cave. Hello, everyone. Thank you once again for watching episode 7 of Balin's Expedition to Moria. Once again, I hope you enjoyed it. And let me know what you think. Let's chat about this episode here. The vision that I had with the explanation of the dwarves going through the waterworks and turning on the water again, going through the gardens and the forges and the mirrors and all that stuff would kind of be like essentially a montage. You'd get a couple quick scenes of Hona and Ori and some dwarves pulling some levers and watching the water flow, maybe waking up some of the wildlife nearby, maybe fighting it, maybe not, just being aware that it's there. You get a quick little sequence of Owen pointing dwarves around on which gardens to go to, showing them how to plant seeds and water them and take care of them all and all that. Then you get a quick sequence of the three brothers and dwarves turning these giant glass mirrors that are in the shape of like big hands, and realigning everything to make the light from the sun bounce off of all of them and then kind of spread throughout all of Moria. And then finally you have a little sequence of Balin and a group of dwarves just fighting goblins as they kind of reclaim the forges. And then we kind of have this big final sequence of just a time lapse of them slowly rebuilding and repairing all of these old structures and houses and markets and stables and all that kind of stuff as they finally just kind of put everything back together. And then in celebration they have this big massive feast. So I think realistically, the next part of the song that we heard, it could be sung at the feast, and I did that for the sake of the video, but I think realistically it would almost be better if it was played kind of over the montage. Just as you're seeing these visuals of this montage, then the singing would just be happening in the background to accompany the montage kind of thing. But yeah, and then that leads us to the Abyss, and one of my next kind of favorite moments of the story. So I know in a lot of Lord of the Rings games, they talk about the Nameless, and the Nameless are mentioned in the books. Gandalf brings them up at one point, and they're a huge mystery, and they're just, what are they? Who are they? Where did they come from? Much like the Watcher, where did that come from, Gandalf? And he just says, like, sometimes there's mysteries that I don't even know. And I think that's really cool and fun to play with. So the idea that I kind of came up with is that with the Balrog roaming around in Moria, because it's a Balrog, there's such dark magic tied to it that it kind of like almost poisons and corrupts the land that's near it. And from there, it just more and more dark magic starts building. So the idea is that the shadows come to life, but they need something to feed off of in order to actually like get a physical form and live. So I kind of played with the idea of this fear thing to help, because I think that's one of Loney's like development points of he's this most scared one of the brothers, and he's learning how to overcome all of his fears and be brave, just like Frar. And through the help of Hona, he learns how to embrace the fear and find his courage. So kind of taking that and combining it with the Faceless, or the Nameless, as they're referred to in the books, to just create something fun and unique. And then we can see the Nameless in a different media, because we've read about them very briefly. We've seen them in the games, but we haven't seen. They were never shown, obviously, in the movies. Maybe they'll appear in Rings of Power. It'd be cool if they were, but yeah, I just, of course, at the time of writing this years and years ago when I first wrote it, it was just Rings of Power wasn't a thing yet. So, but yeah, so I thought it was a fun little thing. And then we have, of course, the Balrog, where, and this is kind of to try to show that it needs to solve two problems. They have to deal with the Balrog, in that Balin promised that he would take care of it so that the dwarves could arrive, and realistically, the dwarves didn't encounter the Balrog. Like Balin's expedition never really encountered the Balrog. Like it didn't slow them down in rebuilding. Like they lived there for years, and there was no signs of the Balrog. So I can't have the Balrog kill them, but also it can't go according to plan, because the Balrog can't be gone forever. So that's where the idea is kind of like a last minute desperation of, we're in this cave, Frar's in the mines, the Balrog is coming towards us. What do we do? Okay, plant the explosive, set it off, and if all goes well, it'll collapse and it solves our problem. And it will, in that they've now trapped the Balrog, but as kind of a theme of the story, or of the show, is that you can't just solve your problems by burying them away, so to speak. So by solving one problem, because they weren't necessarily prepared for it, they created a new problem. And that's what leaves us with them waking up the Watcher. I thought it would be a fun way to introduce the Watcher, because those that know the story know that the Watcher then makes an appearance at the lake, and prevents the dwarves from escaping out the west side of Moria. So I wanted to show that by the choices that they made earlier, or I guess right now, with with their solution to the Balrog, it sets up for their failure later, because they weren't careful, they rushed into things, they didn't go in with a solid plan, or they did, but their plan got ruined when Flowey died. So all these things kind of pile on top of each other. One thing leads to another, and everything just leads to their demise because of the one thing that went wrong, which was they didn't account for Flowey dying. And then we have the armor as well. So I could have this wrong, but I'm really positive that Balin's expedition does find Durin's axe, and I assume his armor, because if I remember right, Balin gets like buried essentially with Durin's armor. Like, Balin's in his tomb and he's wearing Durin's armor, and then there was a reference that Tolkien wrote about Owen dying to the Watcher with Durin's axe. I believe that's the case. So that's where I came up with them discovering the axe and the armor, because it's like, well, if they are gonna find it, I would assume it would be where Durin was, and the last we saw Durin was, of course, fighting the Balrog, and he didn't escape that cavern. He died there. So the armor and axe is just going to be chilling there. It's made of mithril, super strong. It's not going to burn or melt, really. So it just made the most sense to appear. And then that's why I have Balin give the axe to Owen, because I believe he is supposed to have it when he fights with his encounter with the Watcher. But then Balin keeps the armor, as he is indeed like the next in Durin's bloodline, so to speak. Like, if you were to pull out the dwarf family tree, and you got the Durin the second, third, fourth, blah blah blah, and then there's like a gap because Nain didn't necessarily have, or Nain had a brother or something like that, and eventually it all leads to Thorin and Balin, because they're cousins, and all of that. And because Balin is the eldest, and because Thorin's no longer alive, and Balin is older than Dwalin, his brother, so technically Balin is next in the Durin bloodline, so to speak. So that's why he's just going to keep the armor, but he's giving the axe to Owen, because Owen has to have it, because that's just what Tolkien wrote, so I had to give it to him. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed it. Once again, leave a comment, tell me your thoughts, your feelings, if you hated it or not. All feedback is good feedback, and please keep sharing, and yeah, please just keep sharing it. People are loving it, and for that YouTube and TikTok algorithm to keep pushing it, people just need to share and comment on it. And I do thank you for all the support that everyone has given me. It has meant a lot. If this is your first episode you've watched, go back and watch the other ones. They're all fun. If you're interested in Rings of Power and want to chat about it, I've just put up a Rings of Power reaction to the trailer, and we do some predictions and thoughts about what we think is going to happen based on the trailer we've seen so far. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.